DiscerningHearts.com presents St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul, with Dan Burke, who is the founder and president of the Avila Institute for Spiritual Formation. He's also the co-host of the Divine Intimacy radio show with his wife, Stephanie. He is the author and editor of more than 17 books on Catholic spirituality, including Devil in the Castle, the book on which this series is based. St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul, with Dan Burke. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Dan, thank you again for joining me. I'm so grateful for this time, especially with one of the busiest men on the planet.
Well, you know, your ministry is really important to the church, and Discerning Hearts is. We have so many people who love what we do and love what you do. So it's a real blessing to be with you and contribute to the great work that you're doing.
I consider it a great complementing ministry. We complement each other, and I think that's how the Holy Spirit works. That's a great sign, isn't it? Unity.
Yeah, and I think what's cool about it is, you know, when we can do things like this, there's not a territorialism, right? It's just, if I lift you up and you lift me up, then everybody wins, you know. And so it's a beautiful thing when different organizations who have similar missions but unique expressions can collaborate in a way that really lifts all, you know, rising tide, right? Lifts all boats. So
love that. It's not global warming either. It's just heartwarming.
Right. Nothing to do
with heartwarming.
Right, right.
Oh, anyway, yeah, and I was so grateful when The Devil in the Castle, St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul came out. I've had to take some of my tabs out because they lose their meaning after a while when you have so many in there, and you're just.
Right. Yeah, I've got a lot of tabs in my own copy too. So.
And because it brings to us an aspect of the castle. We talked about this last time, but it brings about aspects of the castle that is contextualized with a lot of other great teaching, but brings forward how the enemy will work in the castle. And again, it will in our interior life affect us in so many different ways outside too. And that's not spoken often about in relation to the interior castle, is it?
No, it's been an ignored aspect of her teaching. I think only, you know, touched upon peripherally at times. And that's when I wrote the book. Is I did it so that that could be brought out and people who are moved by her work could be helped. But also to introduce the broader church to the understanding of her unique contribution to how the enemy works at different stages of the spiritual life. Certainly, you can find that in John as well, John of the Cross. A little bit in Ignatius. I know you've had some great shows with Father Gallagher, because the first rules 1 through 14 tend to be in the purgative way, and the second rules tend to be normative in the illuminative way. But Teresa gives a very thorough treatment of every stage, really, from the beginning of the interior life to union. She gives the most thorough, I think, description and experiential description, which is helpful to help us understand what's coming, you know, as we travel the narrow way into the castle, and we can understand what's coming, maybe better understand what we're experiencing now, and then more effectively correspond or yield or follow, you know, the Lord's wisdom as to how to fight and how to make progress.
Well said. I think the thing that helped me the most when I went back and through your guidance in the book, you said, go back and bring the interior castle with you so you can kind of cross-reference things.
Yeah.
And so it was helpful. Not only did you say it, but she also reiterated the importance of realizing that the interior castle is actually something that's in within us.
Yeah.
That to say, and this, I love this, that you have to say, I need to go into a room, but you're already in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked about that last time. So we don't realize that, do we?
Yeah. I mean, the kingdom of God is within us. And I think it's something I honestly have struggled with. It's easier for me, and maybe it's maleness, I don't know. It's easier for me to conceive of the narrow way of this external road that I'm walking up. But no, I mean, it's why no matter where we are, we can be with him. It's why we can always draw upon his presence and strength, because he is in some mysterious way within us. And so the interior castle is it's weird. I kind of like to conceive of it as both inside and outside of us. And this may be confusing, but I just had this vision as we're talking about it. But as we enter in, now it is within us, right? And then as we go deeper, it's more fully within us, so that helps me to conceptualize, because it's hard for me to envision the entire castle being interior, but then as I move more deeply in, it's more fully present. And that's certainly true, and has been spoken of by the mystics, and even in iconography. I love the Orthodox icon of Jesus, where you see him in a circle, as a baby, but in his, godly form too, in her womb. And I always think of, the more filled we are with Jesus, the bigger that space he occupies in our soul. And so those kinds of images help me understand the mystery a little bit. I mean, it's a mystery because it's hard, it escapes our ability to fully grasp and understand at any given time. But it is a beautiful analogy that I think, in it, at the very least, helps a person to understand, the average Catholic to understand that my Catholic faith is not about, I go to church on Sunday and I go home. It's way bigger than that. And I think, the mystics in particular help to illumine a world and a life that we would have never otherwise conceived of if they hadn't shared their heart, like St. Teresa's done in the interior castle.
Oh, your paradoxical imagery sounds a lot like your good friend John of the Cross.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever seen that picture that he drew, the ascent? It's actually like a mountain that turns
right
downward.
Yeah.
It's I think that's what you're kind of describing in your own way, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, and St. John of the Cross speaks of the incomprehensible nature of the mystery of our union with God and our progress in God. And the analogy I use is, one of my favorite landscape artists is Albert Bierstadt, and he has this beautiful painting of of a valley in Colorado that I've been to, and so, but the best we can do, like in this show and in the writings of these saints and all that, the best we can do is try to paint a picture of this beautiful scene, right, for people. But the only way to really understand it is to enter into it. So when I look at the picture of Bierstadt, I think, well, I've fished in that stream, and I've been there when it was snowing, and I've been there when the Rocky Mountain sheep were crossing the road, and I've been there when a moose appeared, and I've smelled the spring emerging, and I've seen the early snow and fall. And so what we do, what we're trying to do, I think what Discerning Hearts does, what spiritualdirection.com does, is try to entice people into the scene and to say, look how amazing and beautiful this is. But the call to the participant, in our work is, but the only way to really understand it is you have to enter in, and then follow the mystic as they guide you, through all of these beautiful experiences. And certainly, I think Teresa is one of the greatest guides in the history of the church. But we must enter in. We have to begin to practice mental prayer. We have to begin a more serious awareness of where we are in relationship to where God is, and gaining that Godward self-knowledge. Otherwise, it's only head knowledge. And, St. Paul speaks of that kind of knowledge as knowledge that puffs up. And so it causes a kind of pride and a lack of true understanding, because we think we understand it, but we've never really entered into it. And so it's just ideas, right? So the goal of, forgive me for being presumptuous, but I think, knowing you a little bit, the goal of discerning hearts is, let's learn how to enter in so that we can meet the God of this saint, or the saint of this God, of our God, and they can show us the way, and then we can begin to be transformed by that encounter that comes no other way. It doesn't come through reading, it comes through living, but reading helps, so it's all a bit of a challenge to understand.
It is. And as you said, as you enter in that and you begin to have that encounter, what is it you're experiencing? And it's one thing, I mean, I think this is why I'm so glad you're with us. And I'm so glad you brought this book forward, because you begin to encounter things and you're not sure what they are. And
Right.
Discernment is essentially, it's not just an Ignatian tool, it's a wisdom that comes with its great sister is prudence. And
Yeah.
it's, pausing to say, okay, is this a temptation, or is this operating out of a woundedness, or am I really hearing this right? And few teach that, I think, very well, and I especially in today's world, because there's so many voices, Dan.
Yeah, what you described, and how you just described how you encounter a circumstance, and then you begin to ask, what's going on? Why is this happening? What does it mean? You're raising yourself up out of the circumstance, which means you've eliminated really the possibility of being a victim, because you're entering into a conversation with God about what's happening, which then it's like turning lights on all over the room, a dark room. And that's a really key moment, I think, for Christians when they're trying to follow God. And what St. Teresa illumines in the Interior Castle is tries to help us understand what's happening. Ignatius too, right? I mean, the thinking about thinking, which Father Gallagher so beautifully reveals in his great book on discernment of spirits, is just so powerful. But if we simply are going throughout every day not with this interior dialogue with God, we are living like animals, and like animals, we will be controlled by circumstance. We will be, our base nature will rule us, coupled with circumstance, which means the enemy does whatever he wants. But as soon as we begin to ask the questions you asked, or examine things the way St. Teresa or St. Ignatius or St. John of the Cross teach us, we begin to exit out of that place that really is a pathway to hell. I mean, it's the road to hell, is that place where we just live in our lower nature. But we begin to exit out of that, and then all sorts of beautiful realities emerge. And we find healing, and we find peace, and we find encouragement, and we find perspective that begins to separate us from the world. Not that we don't care about the world or love the world in the sense the people in the world and their suffering, but we begin to think completely differently about all of that reality. And instead of being tossed about by the waves of culture and of circumstance, we become a light to say, our only salvation is Jesus, come this way. And that's really the mission of my life, is however broken I am, a broken beacon is better than none, right? Or a dim bulb looks great even in a dark room. So, but the closer we get to him, the brighter the bulb gets, and the more healed we are, and the better light we are. And so it helps us to become one with him ourselves, and then help others to become to know the same pathway and to know the same reality. It's I couldn't imagine a better way to live life than to do what we do.
Yeah, that explosion of awareness for some. I mean, it's so the example of Saint Francis of Assisi,
Mm-hmm.
or in what you've outlined, even in the opening mansions in the book, show a complementarity in a very real way to the teachings of the Desert Fathers, the
Sure.
ones who wanted to go out there and to really not only battle the things that would block them to a greater union,
Mm-hmm.
and would give us such a direction. And then guys like Dominic, the great mendicant orders, the Dominicans, who wanted to go out and preach and share all that.
Mm-hmm.
What Teresa is giving us in the interior castle, I think, and you mentioned this last time, the reason she's the doctor of the church, because she now can articulate, particularly to lay people, though I don't know if that was her intention, but to lay people as well as her sisters, what this looks like and how earthy it is, that humus, that humility, to be able to express something so true.
You know, it's funny, you asked an interesting question there, or you posed it, whether or not it's written to lay people. She was brilliant. I think because of her union with God. And of course, she says, I'm writing just for my sisters. But frankly, I think that was to throw off the Inquisition.
Yeah.
That had confiscated her, the book of her life, and because of confusions caused by the Alumbrados and those in that time frame. But I think it's very clear. Otherwise, she wouldn't give analogies that relate to secular issues, which she did, But that was one of the things I love about her. She's very crafty in a very holy way.
Well, and when she's talking about that first and second and third, because
Mm-hmm.
you kind of treat them, even though they're separate chapters, and rightly so, they are kind of a block, of where, as you said, like the what we might term the purgative way.
Right.
And in that first mansion, it struck me as I was reading your description of it, and maybe this is more of the second mansion, but when we were talking about that awareness that the interior castle is in us, okay, that it is in us, that in today's world, there are many right now, and you've seen the polls and you've seen it, that they have an awareness that it's there, but they are so removed from religion for whatever reason that might be. It might be formation or just the scandals that have afflicted the Christian church, many organized religions, whatever that might be. So there's that inkling, and that really, and I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And that might identify or give us a sense of that first castle person or persons, if
Spiritual,
that's the right
but
way.
do you think spiritual but not religious prior to entering the castle? I think that's where I would agree with you. Yeah, because you don't yet see probably my favorite single passage in the Catechism, which I tend to reword just a bit, but I love it. It's the entire divine economy is ordered to bring us to union with God. Mm-hmm. They don't yet see the beauty of that divine economy, and some have been injured in the midst of that divine economy by the broken humanity that exists. Mm-hmm. But it's very common before people enter into the castle to be, thoroughly confused about what the faith is about. Even if they've been baptized and been in the church for 40 years, most people don't know the purpose of confession. They think it's only for forgiveness of sins. And that certainly is a very, impoverished view of it. It has a much richer and deeper reality. Certainly that's an important aspect. They don't understand that the meeting of heaven and earth that comes in the holy sacrifice and the Mass, and how it is that we truly receive the body, blood, soul, and divinity, and that our disposition in that reception determines our pathway to heaven or hell even, it's that consequential. You can receive the Eucharist and become a saint, or receive the Eucharist and desecrate the Lord because you have unconfessed mortal sin. So you have two people walking side by side up the aisle. One is solidifying their pathway to hell, and the other is becoming a saint, and they're both doing the same outward action. But people outside of the castle have no awareness of these dynamics. They're not living in the fullness of all of that nascent power that comes through baptism and the confirmation. They're living in ways that suppress and reject those graces, even though you can't unbaptize yourself, So the work of God is always present and drawing us. But yeah, it's, she talks about familiar spirits, Saint Teresa, which means, what she means by that is the early stage person has demons that they normatively cooperate with, thus the word familiar. And they're not even aware of it, but they're just jerked around all the time. And we see this all the time. And I don't say it in any, like, none of this is a criticism of anyone in these states. Like, if you're listening and you're finding, you're going, wow, that's me. Neither of us are criticizing you. It's more of just saying, hey, there's just such a better way, and let us walk with you, and let's figure this out together, no matter how bad it is, no matter how broken, if you've suffered sexual abuse or some of the worst kinds of things that the world can do to you, and even people in the church can do to you. There is no remedy other than drawing near to Jesus. So let's go, let's move, let's rise and be on our way, as Jesus said.
Yeah, and she will say, particularly as the soul that it hears that, and when I say hear, I'm thinking of the Benedictine, you hear with the ear of your heart.
Yes.
When you hear that, and you're moving towards that sound. You're moving towards that. That entrance into what would be understood as the second mansion.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do the things that continue to offer that I can't think of a better word than ping. There's a ping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it's because you're corresponding to your baptism and your confirmation. James 4:7, which I think is the best summary of the Ignatian rules, is resist the devil and draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And so as you do that, as you live that through Teresa's wisdom, he will increase in you. So he's already drawing you, right? Otherwise you wouldn't care, you wouldn't buy the book, you wouldn't listen to this podcast, you would, it's evidence that he's in you, that you ache for something different, that you long for something you don't understand, but you don't want to be where you are. God be praised for that deep, a difficult, stomach turning, place. But be encouraged, because that is evidence. The people I worry about are people who don't care, who are ambivalent, who it doesn't matter. Their souls are numb. St. Paul said to Timothy, it's as if they have seared their consciences with a hot iron. It's an extremely dangerous place to be. But if you're worried about it, God is working in you. We need to turn that worry into devotion, but nonetheless, he's working in you. If you are ashamed of your sin, God is working in you, not to suppress you in shame, but to show you what it means to live in freedom, no matter how much you've sinned. So that's the call of Teresa. Come in deeper. It's the call of Jesus. Come deeper. Let me show you all that I have for you.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too far afield from what our discussion, but it makes me think of something from Teresa's life, that she will say in these stages, maybe throughout through all the mansions, and the importance of having good spiritual companions, good spiritual friends. And in her, perspective, spiritual directors.
Mhm.
But that, because it's the importance of the Christian witness. And where I'm going with this is that when you flip it and we become that spiritual companion to someone in that second mansion,
Yeah.
someone who is seeking, it's so important where we're at. And she became that for that whole order, or at least for many women within
Yeah.
the order. They began to see what was happening to her, and they were attracted to that, and hence the reform really took off. Would you
Yeah.
say that's appropriate?
Yeah. When you're pointing out an important aspect of being an authentic disciple of Jesus, right? It's when you are an authentic disciple of Jesus, you begin to change and the world changes around you. It's inevitable. And if it's not happening, you don't understand, and you need to dig in and go, okay, wait, I thought it was this. I thought if I'm a good businessman and I go to mass on Sunday, I'm an authentic disciple of Jesus. And I want to say, you are not far from the kingdom of God, but that's not it. There's a phrase that makes some people uncomfortable that I like to use, which is, if you're not all in, you're not in at all. And what that doesn't mean is, if you're not perfect now, you're excluded, you're bad, you're rejected. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, you have to be all in for that next clear calling of God to draw more deeply into him. And he's all in for you. I mean, he gave everything for you. So he's there for us. But yeah, a determination of healthy, and maybe I should add this probably to the 3 ways. In fact, I may do that in my next iteration. But in the first movements, we are figuring out a little bit of the gospel and who is Jesus and who am I and whatever. And then, subsequent movements, we begin to be concerned about the salvation of others. We begin to be concerned. Now, we're not quite ready to be teachers then, but we certainly are able to follow the command of Jesus. He said, go into all the world, make disciples and baptize, people in my name. So we can certainly become witnesses of what he's beginning to do. And then we become true disciples. And then we learn about the foundations of the interior life. Then we can begin to teach, but that's after we've overcome, habitual mortal sin and those sorts of things. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's normal Christian life that we're taking people with us. And it's why the demons try to keep us from out of the interior castle, is because they know if Kris gets in there, so this is the demon talking, if Kris gets in there, she's going to start this stupid ministry called Discerning Hearts and bring, thousands and thousands of people. He hates that, right? I mean, that's his words, not God's words. Jesus' words are, well done, right? But that's how it works. So the enemy works very hard to keep us from entering in, because normatively then we bring people with us.
We'll continue this conversation in our next episode. You've been watching St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul with Dan Burke. To view other episodes of this program, along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, view the playlist list below, or you can find them at discerninghearts.com or within the free Discerning Hearts app. There, too, you can download the podcast versions of these conversations. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. We hope that if this has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer authentic and rock-solid spiritual formation freely to souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible, to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul with Dan Burke.